Hello, everyone. My name is Nina Mitchell, and this is my presentation on environmental racism, the systematic use of the land against us. So we'll get into an introduction, understanding the history, modern environmental racism, solutions, and conclusion. For decades, predominantly African American communities have been pushed closest to landfills, highways, petrochemical plants, flood zones, and data centers, all while being denied the resources and political power needed to protect themselves. These patterns did not appear on accident, but they stem from historical practices like redlining and the intentional destruction of Black neighborhoods in the name of development. Today, the consequences are visible in places like Louisiana's Cancer Alley, the flood-prone streets of Hampton, Virginia, and the growing clusters of data centers in predominantly Black and low-income counties across the country. Understanding environmental racism means recognizing both the history that create these iniquities and the urgent need to dismantle the system that is keeping them alive. This essay explores how these injustices persist and argues that meaningful change requires more than just awareness. But to understand our future of combating this issue, we must understand the past. Throughout history, there has been a purposeful destruction of Black communities. An example of this is Seneca Village in New York. It was one of the first free Black settlements in New York, established in 1825. The autonomous community hosted many homes, churches, and schools. However, in 1855, the city of New York decided Seneca Village had no value and would be part of the site for a central park. Many of the residents were being subjected to violence and hate crimes and were run out of their settlements to make room for the park. Another example is the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Greenwood was a completely Black-owned and run professional district with banks, stores, and other businesses. It was one of the most successful African American run towns in the country until it was burned to the ground. The Tulsa Race Massacre was the cause of an unknown interaction between a white woman and a Black man. The interaction in the elevator between Dick Rowland and Sarah Page varied from person to person, spanning from accused flirting to alleged assault. A riot followed the arrest of Rowland that would completely erase the district of Greenwood and claim many lives. In the early morning of June 1st, 1921, it was completely destroyed. The shops and homes were looted and then burned to the ground. At least 800 people were injured and anywhere from 36 to 300 people were killed. Redlining. The Homeowners Loan Corporation, also known as the HOLC, was a federal agency established by Franklin D. Roosevelt that created these maps between 1933 and 1940 in order to color code desirable neighborhoods. The most desirable neighborhoods were shaded green, and the least, usually African American, were shaded red. Financial institutions would then use this information to decide who they would loan money to. Those from redline neighborhoods were often seen as high risk and would not be able to get loans. This prevented many Black people from home ownership and building credit. Redlining also contributed to the overall quality of these communities, like grocery stores and other businesses often did not build in these neighborhoods due to the African American population. Modern day environmental racism. One of the most prevalent examples of modern day environmental racism is Cancer Alley. It is a stretch on the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It consists of 200 petrochemical and fossil fuel production plants stretching 85 miles. According to Public Health on Call, the area produces about 25% of the country's petrochemical products. There are many communities within the area that are affected by the industrial air pollutions. Residents suffer from respiratory illnesses, maternal reproductive harms, and cancer at a rate of 7 times the national average. Cancer rates are 44% higher than the national average in the area 1.7 kilometers away from the plant, with those closest to the plant experiencing 71% higher, experiencing cancer 71% higher than that of the national average. The other health issues include tachycardia, headaches, nosebleeds, difficulty breathing, eye irritation, and more. They are also very prevalent, affecting anywhere from 1/3 to more than half of these residents. The population of the area of the alley where this study took place is 58% Black or African American. Other areas in close proximities to other plants have anywhere from 60% to 90% African American population. Another example of modern day environmental racism that is a direct effect of redlining is the areas in Hampton, Virginia. It is a below sea level city where redlining has pushed the 49% Black and low income households to the more coastal parts of the city, like Hampton Roads and Norfolk. With rising sea levels, these areas are more vulnerable to detrimental floods. As the sea levels continue to rise, the majority of the city is often flooded during storms. In these areas, the infrastructure is so poorly maintained and unincluded in from flood protection projects. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers announced a multi-billion-dollar flood protection project for Norfolk, not including the predominantly Black community of Berkeley. According to Ed Dami et al., it is projected that by 2080, coastal flooding will cause around $5.1 billion of damage annually, with Hampton Roads having the highest rate of sea level rising on the East Coast. The social vulnerable areas that are predominantly African American within Hampton are ill-equipped to deal with these detrimental floods without state intervention. Draining systems and roads are inadequate in long-term protection from flooding. Many projects, much like the aforementioned one above, have been canceled or non-inclusive to low-income Black communities that are abundant in Hampton. The last one we'll talk about is targeting Black communities for data centers. In 2023, data centers use 4.4% of U.S. electricity. According to Ken Demir 2025, that number is set to triple by 2028. They also use they use extreme amounts of water. A single data center able to use about 110 million gallons of water per day. A study from Dr. Xiao-Lei Ren and his colleagues show that 9 out of the top 10 counties affected negatively by data centers are predominantly Black and low income. This has been coined as digital redlining, as in the practice of building infrastructure that supports technology in redline communities. According to Johnson 2025, all data centers in Georgia require about 27 billion gallons of water a year. According to the same article, the data centers also use an equivalent amount of energy it takes to power 3.9 million homes. There's also a concern of jobs promised by the building of these centers failing to come to fruition. In addition to environmental concerns, utility rates can rise dramatically due to the use of water and electricity in the area. In addition to Georgia, the data center built in Tennessee by XAI in Boxtown, a majority African American community, uses methane gas turbines to power its supercomputer. This has increased the concentration of nitrogen dioxide in the air by 3%. Peak concentration increased a full 79% compared to pre-XI. XAI. Exposure to nitrogen dioxide can cause development of respiratory issues, which many elderly citizens in the area being diagnosed with asthma at an alarming rate. The high rates of sudden respiratory illness are directly correlated with high mortality rates. These patterns are starting to be seen throughout the country as AI increases in popularity, and data centers are being constructed at higher rates to keep up. So, what can we do? Addressing modern day environmental racism requires action on multiple fronts. One important step is reducing our growing dependence on energy intensive technologies like AI, which drive demand for these massive data centers that are disproportionately built in historically redlined neighborhoods. AI is not inherently evil, though we must find a way to continue technological developments in a sustainable way. Until then, we must relearn to rely on less on platforms like ChatGPT, Gemini, and XAI. At the same time, real change means directly investing into communities that have carried the burden of environmental harm for generations. Our financial resources should be directed towards strengthening infrastructure, improving housing, and expanding access to clean air and water in neighborhoods that have been systematically neglected. Structural change also depends on political pressure and collective action, holding local politicians accountable, especially around zoning and land use decisions. This helps to prevent industries from targeting vulnerable communities for polluting facilities, supporting organizations such as the Hip Hop Caucus, Memphis Community Against Pollution, and other environmental justice nonprofits amplify the voices of residents who have long demanded fair treatment, both on a national and a local level. When necessary, communities also must protest and resist the constructions of new data centers, petrochemical plants, and other hazardous projects in their neighborhoods. Environmental racism isn't just a policy issue, it is something that people live with every day. For many communities of color, the air they breathe, the water they drink, and the land they call home are shaped by decades of decisions that systematically displace the African American community and have placed factories in their new flood-prone backyards. Today, these decisions have not strayed from the patterns we see in our history books, from the toxic stretch of Louisiana known as Cancer Alley to the neighborhoods in Hampton that repeatedly flood to the data centers poisoning land across the country. The design of these decisions is clear and intentional. These burdens are not distributed by chance. They are a result of long-standing practices like redlining and the purposeful displacement of Black communities in the name of progress. It is our duty as advocates for change to be equally intentional in our fight for environmental equity. We must into grassroots organizations that support the movement and apply pressure on a local and national level to politicians. Furthermore, we must financially support our communities where the government falls short. Combating modern environmental racism means combining policy advocacy, community investment, and grassroots resistance to create a healthier, more equitable futures where many can grow in these communities without fear of health disparities or lack of water and power. Futures where people can uplift their historical ties without the reminders of systematic oppression. Thank you.